Welcome to Sports Spectrum, the sports and faith podcast that brings Jesus back into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
This episode of the Sports Spectrum podcast with Orlando Magic forward Jonathan Issac is brought to you in part by Compassion International. Compassion.com/sportspectrum. That's the place to go to sponsor a child in Jesus' name. We're talking about releasing a child from poverty and making a difference in a child's life. Compassion International does that, and they do it so well, and they allow you to connect directly with a child in need. Go to compassion.com/sportspectrum, sponsor a child today, $38 a month. You won't regret it. Compassion.com/sportspectrum, sponsor a child today. Today's guest on the podcast is Jonathan Issac, Orlando Magic forward. Now, he was selected 6th overall in the 2017 NBA draft by the Magic, played his college ball at Florida State, where he was a member of the All-ACC Freshman Team in 2016-2017, and now he looks to 2018, where he begins his second year in the NBA, played in just 27 games last year due to injuries and averaged just 5.4 points per game. But this podcast is more about what happened away from the court than what happened on the court with Jonathan last season. It was a basketball experience, a basketball encounter at a chapel service that the NBA holds before each game, where Jonathan was transformed and renewed in Christ. It really was a rebirthing of his relationship with the Lord after listening to a chapel service. And Jonathan so eloquently explains and shares this story of how God got a hold of him. It's a really wonderful story, and I really enjoyed talking to him. Just such a wise young man beyond his years, just 20 years old, and as he gets ready for his second season, he's getting ready with a renewed sense of urgency, not just to be a better basketball player, certainly to improve on the court, but to follow the Lord's call away from the court and to do more for him. And I just loved hearing Jonathan's hunger for God, and I think you guys will really like this interview. So let's get right to it. Without further ado, here he is, Orlando Magic forward Jonathan Issac, joining us here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. Take a listen. Jonathan, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Jason, for having me. I'm super excited.
Absolutely. Looking forward to talking here and hearing about your journey. Now, it's crazy to think we're close to the start of training camp here in 2018 for the 2018-2019 NBA season. You're getting ready for your second year in the NBA. You also played in the Summer League and did very well there, averaging 14 points in 3 games. How has this offseason been going for you, Jonathan?
It's been fantastic. Just getting in the gym and focusing on the things I need to focus on in my body and my game. It's been really good. I've been really focused. And I've seen growth in myself in my game.
Health was such a big factor for you in your rookie season, dealing with injuries. What are some of the lessons you learned from being hurt last year that you can take with you into this season?
Man, I would say, first off, just not taking anything for granted and having it having being sidelined so quickly and for so long and not really being anything to do about it. So not taking anything for granted. At the same time, just really focusing on how I take care of my body. I know it was one of those injuries you can't really control, stepping on somebody's feet, but there's still things that I could do better in terms of taking care of my body. So definitely that learned lesson. And but at the same time that I can learn in different ways, being off the court and having the opportunity to watch more than I would have if I was playing really helped me. I think it's going to pay dividends when this second season.
We'll talk more about basketball in a moment in terms of your career and where you are now, but we like to go back and learn about the journey here with our guest on the Sports Spectrum podcast. So tell us about about your journey, where it all started growing up and where basketball played a role.
So born in Bronx, New York. I didn't really take basketball seriously then. It was just something that I did. With my friends and my family. It was just a pass the time type of thing, and I liked it very much. And moved from New York to Naples, Florida when I was 10. And once I got to Naples, I was taller than everybody else. That was the first time I got on a team, and pretty much just played basketball. I never really wanted to do anything else. I just played basketball just to play, and it turned out to get me here. So played high school in Florida Florida State for college, and now Orlando Magic in Florida. So it's been fun, a super fun journey to do it all in Florida. It's been really cool.
Now, you grew up in a household with 5 siblings, correct?
Yes, sir.
That's a big household. What was that like?
Having older brothers and younger brothers, and older brothers that pushed me and motivated me to get better. My older brother Jacob we used to go at it and used to beat up on me all the time on the court. And it was definitely something that motivated me. And just having that family rivalry and family competition, I think drove me to the player I am today.
There was church and God and Jesus. Was that something you learned about when you were growing up, something that was discussed around the dinner table, or was that not something that came about until later?
Absolutely. My father is big time. We were in church every Sunday. We sang in church. We had a little family group, me and my brothers and my sister. We would sing for church not every Sunday, but every once in a while. We would have to memorize these super long verses and paragraphs in the Bible, and they would call on us to recite them during church. And we used to spend a lot of time reading and in the Word.
That's awesome. Now tell me about, was there a rebellious phase for you as a kid? Because when you're in church all the time, it can be kind of one of those deals where it's like, okay, this is all I've ever done. But was there a rebellious phase for you through your teen years with basketball becoming sort of a prominent thing in terms of your faith?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's like that for a lot of people and a lot of kids coming into their own and starting to make some of their own decisions and choices. But once basketball started to take over my life, my faith kind of went in my back pocket, and it was just something that I pulled out every once in a while when things weren't going so well for me on the court and things like that. So absolutely, once I was able to kind of get under the covering of my household and my parents and start to make some of the decisions for myself, man, this world is pretty tempting.
Oh, yeah. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But when was that moment? Is there a moment when you were like, all right, I got to get more serious about this faith? Or was there just this sort of, I hate to use the phrase come to Jesus moment because it's such a cliche thing, but was there that moment for you?
Absolutely. And a lot of people don't know, but it was actually pretty recently. It was last year, right around the time that I had got drafted and had gotten to Orlando. And we have chapel in the league, and so it's like an hour before every game. There's these 15 minutes that you go when you pretty much hear a word from a chaplain and whatnot. And he started with like, okay, I'm gonna start with this verse, and I think it's Luke 6:46, and it says, "Why do you say Lord, Lord, and not do what I say?"
Mm-hmm.
And it was one of those moments where you just kind of get like punched in the gut by the word, and it happens to me all the time. And I was like, wow, like that's me. This is exactly what I do. I say Lord, Lord, but I don't live it. I don't know it. And it was almost like a fork in the road for me. I was like, I'm either going to drop this whole thing and just do me, or I'm going to kind of seek it out and try to figure out what it really is. And I had that time period of just seeking, and I've seen Jesus keep His promise, and in seeking Him, I found Him, and not looking back.
That's a great story. I just wonder, you say that happened while you were, right after you got drafted, while you were playing. So I'm just imagining, okay, you have seeds planted, growing up in the church, and then you have this moment where you're like, all right, I'm convicted here. I got to get more serious. Then what? Did you find a pastor? Did you find maybe a fellow player? How did that happen?
So it's a really weird story. But there's a pastor that lives in my building, and while I was moving in, I'll try to cut this down, but while I was moving in, I ran into him. He asked me if I played like college ball or whatever, so we started to talk. He asked me to lunch, and my first notion is like, I'm not going to lunch with this dude. I don't know this guy. My first thing is like, okay, he didn't tell me he was a pastor, but immediately anybody that just wants to take me out to lunch for no reason, I'm like, okay, this guy's trying to take advantage of me. And that was my first thought. And then I kept seeing this dude. I kept seeing this dude over and over again all the time. And finally I was like, you know what? If I see you again, I will go to lunch with you. This is me, 19, and this older guy. And I'm like, it got to the point where I saw him so much. I'm like, if I see you again, dude, I will go to lunch with you. So I finally go to lunch with him, and he's talking to me about God and about Christ. And I'm like, yeah, I know, whatever, yeah, I grew up in the church. And then after lunch, I'm like, okay, I'm done with this dude. I'm not talking to him anymore, going to lunch with him anymore.
Right.
And after that, I didn't see him for a long time. It was weird. It was like I saw him when I was supposed to. I didn't see him when I wasn't supposed to. And something happened to where a friend of mine, Kevin, he's one of my best friends. He works for the Magic in the front office. And this is right around the time moving into Thanksgiving after that chapel. I think we had a preseason game, a couple preseason games, and that's where I heard the chapel's message, Luke 6:46. And so I was like, okay, let's do some reading. So we were reading together, and we came across the verses, whatever you do for the least of those, you do for me. And so I'm like, all right, this is what we're gonna do. We are going to buy a bunch of burgers, and we're gonna go pass it out to the homeless. And that was our plan. And this story is too long. So that was our plan. And that night I had went to the movies with one of my old high school trainers, and he always used to try to get me to develop a relationship with Christ, ask me to do Bible studies and all that stuff. So it's just funny to see how the seeds of people when I was coming up, how they paid off in the end. So we go to the movies that night, and we watch a movie, and we're afterwards we are just talking for like an hour and a half about God. And he's asking me, how are you doing? I'm like, I'm in kind of this seeking phase. I'm not really sure where I'm at and all this stuff. And he's trying to give me books to read and all this stuff. And I go to leave the movies. It's pretty late at night. And as I'm pulling out, this guy is pulling in, and we like meet. And I'm like, what the heck? So I rolled out my window and I'm like, you, me, breakfast tomorrow morning. And as I'm driving home, I'm like asking myself, like, God, like, do you want this dude to be in my life? And I'm not really sure. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to breakfast with him. So I go to breakfast with him, and same thing. He's talking to me about God, and he's like, what's going to make you great? And I'm like, what? He's like God. And I'm like, I know God is going to make you great, whatever. And I tell him that what me and Kevin were going to do for the homeless people. And he's like, no, you can't do that. And I'm like, what? Why not? He says, if you're going to do it, you got to do it right. Turns out he feeds prisoners in Tallahassee and Orlando, and so he has like a catering company who feeds prisoners. And he's like, if you go buy the food, I'll have the people cook it, and we'll do it like that. And so I'm following this guy to Sam's Club, and as I'm driving in my car following him, I'm asking myself, like, Jonathan, what are you doing? Why are you following this guy right now? This makes no sense. I barely know this guy, and I'm following him to Sam's Club. And long story short, I go and I buy like $700 worth of food, and I just hand it over to this guy. And I'm like, yo, I just fed this guy's family for a year and a half, and
Right.
I'm never gonna hear from him again. And then so he hits me with a text and tells me to come to this address, and I pull up, and there's literally a line of 200 homeless people. And I put on an apron and a hairnet, and I start to serve. And Kevin bought a bunch of socks, and he's serving too. And it was just one of those like really surreal moments. And nobody knows about it. So like not anybody from the Magic knows about it or anything like that. And I went home that night, and I was praying. I'm just like, wow, like I started to cry, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on. And that I wouldn't say that very moment, but that was the time that I was like, in my seeking, in my saying, God, if this is what you want, then show me. This man comes into my life, and things start to unfold, and it's been great ever since.
All right. So there's a great story. And, obviously when things like this happen, people develop a hunger for the Lord, a hunger for his word and for his people. And I know that happened to you. And then all of a sudden, because we did this story on you back in January, you find yourself speaking and preaching at the church in January of this past year. And I just can tell by the way you're laughing how crazy that even sounds. So tell us how that came about and what that experience was like.
So it was super, super weird and crazy. And I kind of just, in developing that relationship with that pastor and going to church, and like you said, just really developing that hunger of like, wow, this isn't any type of coincidence. This is what God wants for me. And I kind of dove in, like you said, all about his word, all about his people. And I felt like through reading that I was deposited like a word. And in my like new, how do I say, like new coming to Jesus.
You're reborn, rebirth, right?
Yeah, kind of that enthusiasm and just like I'm on fire. I'm like, I'm gonna preach, and I'm like, I'm gonna preach. I'm gonna do it. It's gonna be crazy. It's gonna be so cool. And I asked the pastor one morning we had went to prayer, and I had asked the pastor, and he said why not? And I told him I wasn't going to tell him the word, what I was going to talk about, and he trusted me. And it turned out great. It turned out really good. Everyone at the church said they enjoyed it. And yeah, it's been cool kind of seeing that in myself, because a lot of people don't know at Florida State and at other stages of my life, I battled with anxiety. I battled with a lot of things mentally.
Yeah.
Like not, you know what I'm saying? Like, what's the word I'm looking for? I would say just the anxiety and the fear of failing and all the things like that. And if you would have asked anybody from Florida State, anybody from me growing up, if Jonathan could get up and speak to anybody, let alone a church service, but to anybody about anything, the answer would be no. And just the fact that I was able to do it, it kind of confirms it for me, because I know it wasn't on my own strength, it wasn't on my own ability, because I can't do that. And seeing myself kind of exercise it more and more, I've spoken at a youth conference twice now, and since I've preached, so just seeing myself being able to exercise something that I thought I'd never be able to do is amazing for me.
Orlando Magic forward Jonathan Issac joins us here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. And Jonathan, I got to ask you, because while this is all happening to you, while this faith, this newfound faith and these opportunities to speak, while this is happening, you're still trying to navigate through a rookie season in the NBA and be an NBA player at 19 years old. Tell me about navigating and maneuvering through both of those at the same time, this sort of renewed faith, and yet still trying to acclimate yourself into the NBA as a rookie.
You know, it's definitely not easy, but by His grace, I've been doing it and been able to do it. And I say just kind of focusing on myself and not I don't even know how to really put it together, but just focusing on myself, keeping my eyes locked on Jesus and learning from Him and growing in my understanding and relationship with Him has kind of laid the foundation with all of it. You know what I'm saying? My teammates are amazing teammates. The organization is an amazing organization. And I've just been given myself space, and they've given me space to just grow and be me, and not want to adhere to anything that's not me. So I just try to keep myself focused, and He won't give me anything that I can't handle.
Were you able to bring that into the locker room? I know there was the story of inviting your teammates to come to the chapel, and that kind of got a little bit of publicity, and it's hard. You know, obviously you're in the middle of an NBA season, but I wonder sort of how that worked, that dynamic worked for you. And not necessarily, you don't ever want to force your faith into anybody. I've learned that as well in my Christian walk, but you don't want to deny it or be ashamed of it either. So how were you able to kind of bring that into the fold with teammates?
Yeah, so I say, like, just having sensitivity, trying to navigate myself in a way that's wise, and like you said, not trying to deny anything or suppress who I am and my faith, but at the same time being sensitive to everybody else. And man, the way I see it, and the way I kind of carry myself is just to continue, like I said, to keep my eyes on Jesus and continue to grow in understanding and in knowledge of Him. And as I grow into a better mold and a better Christian and a better follower of Jesus, the trail or what I give off, or the fruit that I produce in my life and around other people, will be what they see. And at times it's I won't say locker room, but even with my friends, it's something that people want. It's something that people draw to when they see a change in you. Like, I talk to friends and they're like, what happened to you? like you're a completely different person, and not doing the things we used to do and all that. And not even just that, but the way you think and the way you carry yourself and the way you treat other people, it's fruit. And people see it, and my teammates see it, and my family sees it, and my friends see it, and that's just what I want to focus on giving off. And if that opens the door to anything else, then that's what it'll be.
Give me a sort of welcome to the NBA moment, and maybe it's from the faith perspective, where you got to talk to another player or a legend or somebody about your faith, or maybe it's on the court where you were like, oh, that's that guy, and I'm on the court playing either with or against him. Can you give me an NBA moment that kind of stands out for you?
I'll give you two, one from each. So one was the basketball one where I forgot to put my jersey on before the game, and I'm so happy I didn't get called into the game before my teammate had realized, or the equipment guy had realized. But I'm on the bench, and they played a little trick on me. They filmed it and everything from the bench of me not having my jersey on, and that was just the wow. Like it really showed my nervousness and my jitters to get out there for that. And then I say a faith one is just like I said, just becoming who I am in Jesus, and having that fruit, and having guys say, man, I want to come to church with you, man. I want to sit down and talk to you about what you believe and why you believe what you believe. And it's really opened the door to having real talks and communication about Jesus and about the faith and all that. So it's been really fun.
Just a couple more questions here with Jonathan Issac from the Orlando Magic. Compassion International, we kind of talked off the air about them and mentioned them. They're a sponsor of this podcast. And I know you've sponsored a child. We talk about $38 and literally releasing a child from poverty is one of the great things that Compassion does. Can you share your experience and why you chose to sponsor a child through Compassion and what Compassion has meant through your sponsorship?
So I went to, I'd say a couple months back, I went to a gospel festival Kirk Franklin had put on in Houston. And after everything was done, the Compassion guy had came out and started talking to the audience about it. And I just felt really drawn to, man, it's $38. I was thinking to myself, I'm about to sponsor a bunch of kids, but I was like, let me just start with one. Yeah. And as I, get comfortable with that, then I'll branch out to more. And it's been fantastic, man. Just what they're able to do. I sponsor a 10-year-old boy from Sri Lanka. His name is Risi. We've only been able to get 2 letters back and forth, but it's a work in progress to be able to communicate more. But it's fantastic, man. Just to see what they're able to do through school and all that stuff, all the things that they help those kids with is amazing. I'm happy to be a part of it.
Yeah, I'm just going to do a quick plug. It's compassion.com/sportspectrum is how you can sponsor a child. And they release children from poverty. They provide food, education, training, just life training, and they do it all in the name of Jesus, which is what makes Compassion so wonderful. So go to compassion.com/sportspectrum and look for a way to sponsor a child today. You also work with Project Life, an organization out of Orlando. What's your involvement with that? Tell us about that.
Yes, so this is a branch off of the church I go to, and they do several things in Orlando. From, like I talked about, feeding the prisoners in a prison in Tallahassee, and I think a prison in Orlando or somewhere else. But Project Life is something they put on called the Global Food Festival, and they pretty much travel to other places. They've done it a couple of times in Orlando, but they call it the Global Food Festival, and they just cook. They cook. They clothes, and it's just like a festival of just giving away. They've done one in the Bahamas. They've done 2 in the Bahamas, Jamaica, and they're gearing up to do one in Trinidad. And I was in Trinidad not too long ago to kind of scope out the landscape, and it's just amazing what they do. And they're setting one up in Trinidad to just cook and give away like Compassion, all in the name of Jesus.
That's awesome. I love it. Jonathan Issac, Orlando Magic forward, has been our guest here on the podcast. All right, last question. As you get ready for year 2 in the NBA, what are you learning from the Lord during this season of life where he has you right now? What are you learning from God?
Oh, man, that's a great question. I would just say to trust the process. And it's a plug to Joel. But we want things all in the wrong time. We want it in our time. We want to be great now. We want to lead people to Christ. We want to do so much, but there is a process of God working things out of you and putting you in certain situations to get you to where you need to be. and just being patient, allowing myself to be molded by the potter's hands, and just to stay submitted and continue to grow, continue to grow in knowledge and understanding, and just really just trust the process. The process. I was going to say potter's hand, but trust the process, and just go with the flow. Just go with the ride.
He is Jonathan Issac, Orlando Magic forward, joining us here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. Jonathan, thank you so much for being a part of the show. I really enjoyed talking to you, and we wish you nothing but the best. A lot of people listening here who are NBA fans, I'm sure watching the NBA this year will be watching closely to see how you do, and just excited for the Lord to expand your horizons, and the platform that he's about to give you and present to you will be more, I'm sure, than you could ever imagine. And so we just pray for you, and thank you for joining us here on the podcast.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. I would love to do this again in the future.
And we do thank Jonathan Issac, Orlando Magic forward, for joining us here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. I really enjoyed talking to this young man, and I'm excited to see not only what he does on the basketball court in year 2 in the NBA, but also how God uses him. I can tell that God has great plans for him, and as his platform increases, God will be glorified through it. So very excited to see Jonathan Issac and his progression into year 2 in the NBA. You can follow Jonathan on Twitter at JIsaac_01, JISAAC_01. Give him a follow on Twitter. Let him know you heard this podcast. And I think you guys will really enjoy his story and his journey, and just sharing that would be wonderful. Take a screenshot maybe of it on your phone or your computer and let the world know about this podcast, Sports Spectrum, the intersection of sports and faith. We thank Jonathan for joining us here on the podcast. We also thank Compassion. As you heard, Jonathan sponsors a child through Compassion, and we're grateful for them to be a sponsor of this podcast. And you can make a difference as well in a child's life by sponsoring a child through Compassion International. Go to compassion.com/sportspectrum. $38 a month. The best $38 you'll spend every single month is with Compassion International. Go to compassion.com/sportspectrum and sponsor a child today. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the podcast. You can also reach us on Twitter at sports_spectrum, on Facebook and Instagram as well. You can also go to our YouTube channel and see a bunch of videos there, and also sportspectrum.com, where our content is available every single day. New content, daily devotionals, articles on the intersection of sports and faith, and your chance to subscribe to Sports Spectrum magazine. So go check it out, sportsspectrum.com. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time right here on the Sports Spectrum podcast.